Am I the antagonist for not reconciling with my family after I was framed for theft? I am 23 years old and male. I am the middle child of my parents. My father is 54 years old and my mother is 53 years old. I have an older sister who is 25 years old and a younger brother who is 19 years old. I have been living away from my family for 5 years and have had very minimal contact with them. This is because when I was around 15 years old, my dad's belongings started disappearing from his room. He has a collection of pocket knives that he has gathered from different parts of the United States. Some of these knives are valuable, though not worth thousands of dollars. He also has a collection of baseball cards and autographed baseballs. These items would go missing from his room and end up in my room. Each time this happened, I would get punished for it, and the punishments became progressively more severe. My entire immediate family saw me as a thief for a period of 3 years, despite my constant pleas of innocence. I missed out on vacations, did not have a birthday celebration when I turned 17, and did not get my driver's license or a car until after I moved out. Since I did not have a job, I had no way to save money other than what I had received from past birthdays and odd jobs in my neighborhood. My dad and mom would often express their disappointment in me, and even suggested that I may end up in the local news as a robbery suspect or worse. My extended family did not provide much support either, and viewed me in the same negative light. The situation became so unbearable that I started questioning whether I was actually stealing and not remembering it, perhaps due to some sort of mental struggle or even doing it in my sleep. Earlier this week, my mom called me. She informed me that my dad noticed his things disappearing again, even when I was not present. Finally, my dad had the idea to set up cameras in the hallway, which caught my brother taking the belongings and hiding them in my sister's old room. My mom shared this information with me and apologized on behalf of both her and my dad for not believing me. She also mentioned that they would like to have me over for her birthday dinner and catch up. I asked my mom what the plan was for my brother's punishment, which confused her. I asked again, reminding her of all the things I had missed out on due to being falsely accused of theft. She told me that my dad had taken away my brother's phone for a week and his video games for a month. This made me lose my temper, and I scolded them for treating me so poorly while I was being framed as a thief, while the actual thief only received a minor punishment. I then proceeded to say that I would not be attending any future events with them, and used some explicit language before hanging up and blocking my mom's number. Later, my sister called me and acknowledged that my anger was justified. However, she informed me that our mother was distraught and had locked herself in our parents' bedroom. So am I the asshole? It is completely understandable that you are angry and hurt by your family's treatment of you for years, believing that you were a thief when it was actually your brother. It is clear that this false accusation has had a significant impact on your life, causing you to miss out on important milestones and experiences. Your anger and frustration are justified, and you have every right to express it to your parents. It is unfair that your brother only received a minor punishment compared to what you endured for years. It is also understandable that you do not want to attend any future events with your family, considering the way they treated you. Blocking your mother's number may have been a hasty decision, but it is important to prioritize your own emotional well-being. However, it might be worth considering a conversation with your sister to find a way to support your mother through this difficult time. Overall, your reaction is completely understandable given the circumstances. Am I the antagonist for reporting a teacher who fundraised money for my daughter's cancer to the school? Okay, so I, 45 female, have 3 kids, ages 17, 14, and 9. They've all gone to the same elementary school. My 14-year-old is Tanara and my 9-year-old is Tamya. Tanara was diagnosed with cancer in 5th grade. Her teacher at the time, Miss M, set up a fundraiser for her with some parents in her class. I was very thankful to her, although I didn't know her very well. Anyways, my younger daughter Tamya has 2 best friends, Arshni and Katie. They've been friends since pre-K. Arshni has been staying with us for a few days while her mom is on a work trip. Earlier today, I got a call from her mom asking if I could pick her up from school because she threw up. I did. And when I got there, Katie and Tamya were with her and told me that they were walking back to class after getting something from the office. And then Arshni started throwing up in the hallway completely randomly. It happened to be right outside of Miss M's room. Miss M came out to yell at them about being quiet in the hallway, and then immediately Katie and Tamya asked her for help. Then she rolled her eyes, went inside her classroom, and then came out, handed Katie a roll of paper towels, and said she'd call the nurse and then walked right back to her classroom. They were shocked and stayed there and waited for the nurse. By the way, none of them knew who Miss M was and just regarded her as the 5th grade teacher. When they told me this, I immediately called Arshni's mother to ask if she wanted me to talk to the school about it, and she said yes, definitely, and that she would call them later if I didn't want to. But I went to the main office with Katie and Tamya and reported what happened. They checked the security footage and showed it to me, and sure enough, what they said was true. Not even making sure she was okay, she just had 2 9-year-olds attempt to clean up the other one's vomit while she cried. They called the teacher down to the office immediately and I left. About an hour ago, Miss M messaged me on Facebook and told me that she has vomit phobia or something and couldn't deal with it, and said after all she's done for my family, it's ridiculous that I reported her for some stranger's kid. I also want to add that there are 2 teachers in every classroom. She didn't even tell the other teacher in the room. But if she really cared, she could have asked the other teacher to go deal with it. I just think it's unprofessional for someone choosing to work with little kids to let that happen. If she was a high school or even middle school teacher, I'd feel differently, but these are 9-year-old kids, and she's an adult. Maybe I am an asshole, but even after I found out who she was, I didn't feel much remorse about informing the school. So am I the asshole? Miss M, as a teacher, had a responsibility to ensure the safety and well-being of all the students, regardless of whether she had a phobia or not. It is unprofessional for her to have left the children to deal with the situation on their own, without even notifying the other teacher present in the room. Your decision to report the incident was justified, as it highlighted a failure on the part of Miss M to fulfill her duties as a teacher. Am I the antagonist for setting a no family visits on weeknights boundary with my boyfriend? I, 24-year-old female, recently moved out on my own for the first time after graduating from college. I have been in a relationship with my boyfriend, 23-year-old male, for about a year and a half. While I have no prior experience with long-term relationships, he has been in a few. However, he has never attended college and has always lived with his parents. Before I continue, it's important to note that his dad suffered a brain anoxia injury 3 years ago, and as a result, my boyfriend has to help take care of him along with his mom and also his 14-year-old brother. His dad is now completely disabled, losing his eyesight and requiring full-time care. Currently, my boyfriend is staying with me about 98% of the time without contributing to rent, utilities, or internet expenses. He has occasionally bought groceries and paid for small things like light bulbs, a toaster, decorations, and eating out. However, I have told him that this needs to change going forward. It's worth mentioning that my job requires a commute of 1.5 hours, while his job is only a 30-minute commute away. Recently, he asked if it was all right for his family and a friend from his hometown who is in the military to come over for dinner. I expressed a preference for not hosting them on a weekday, as we would be out of town during the weekend with my mom and his friend would be leaving on Monday. However, a weekday was their only option. He assured me that he would cook and have everything prepared when I returned home, implying I wouldn't have to do anything. When I arrived home around 6:45 p.m. that day, everyone was already there, having been there for almost an hour. They made themselves comfortable, which made me angry, though I chose to remain silent. I ended up serving dinner and cleaning up the kitchen for everyone, and we all engaged in conversation until they left around 8:30. Later that night, as we went to bed, my boyfriend criticized my behavior, even going as far as calling me a derogatory term. I confronted him, expressing my frustration over the fact that he invited his family and friend into my apartment, a place he hasn't fully contributed to financially, and then had the audacity to insult me for not being in a social mood. Though he apologized, he still defended his choice of words. I acknowledged that I didn't mean to come across that way, yet reiterated that his insult was unjust. While I understand his desire for me to have a close relationship with his family, I have my limits. Our relationships with our respective parents are significantly different. I am making an effort to be accommodating and supportive, but when it involves my own home, my boundaries come into play. The following day, I discussed with him that from now on, it is a boundary that no families or parents on both sides can come over on weeknights as long as he lives in my apartment. If I'm working from home, we can consider it. But otherwise, the answer is no. Am I the one at fault here? You have every right to set boundaries and expectations when it comes to your own living space, especially if your boyfriend is not contributing financially to the rent and utilities. It was disrespectful of him to invite his family and friend over without your consent, especially on a weekday when you had expressed a preference for weekends. Additionally, his comment about you acting like a bitch was uncalled for and disrespectful. It's understandable that you were upset and angry about the situation, and his apology does not excuse or justify his behavior. Setting a boundary about not having family or parents over on weeknights is a reasonable request, especially given your long commute and the fact that it is your apartment. It's important to have open and honest communication about your expectations and find a compromise that works for both of you in terms of having visitors. Overall, it seems like your feelings are valid, and you have every right to establish your boundaries in your own home. Am I the antagonist for setting a no family visits on weeknights boundary with my boyfriend? I, a 24-year-old female, recently moved out on my own after graduating from college. I have been in a relationship with my boyfriend, a 23-year-old male, for about a year and a half. This is my first long-term relationship, but he has been in a few before. However, he never attended college and has lived with his parents his entire life. Before I continue, it's important to know that his dad had an accident 3 years ago and suffered a brain anoxia injury. He now requires full-time care, and my boyfriend helps take care of him along with his mom and 14-year-old brother. Currently, my boyfriend has been staying with me about 98% of the time, but has not contributed to rent, utilities, or internet expenses. He has bought groceries twice and paid for various small items such as light bulbs, a toaster, decorations, and meals out. I have expressed to him that this needs to change going forward. Additionally, it's worth noting that my job requires a commute of an hour and a half, while his job only requires a 30-minute commute. Last week, my boyfriend asked if his family and a friend from his hometown who serves in the military could come over for dinner. I informed him that I preferred it not be on a weekday, but since we would be out of town with my mom over the weekend and his friend was leaving on Monday, a weekday was the only option. He assured me that he would cook and have everything ready by the time I got home, so I wouldn't have to do anything. When I arrived home around 6:45 p.m. that day, everyone was already there, and they had been there for nearly an hour. They had made themselves very comfortable, which made me angry. Despite my feelings, I remained quiet and helped serve dinner, as well as cleaned up the kitchen afterwards. We all chatted until they left around 8:30. Later that night, as we went to bed, my boyfriend expressed his dissatisfaction with my behavior. He even went as far as calling me a derogatory term. I confronted him about his audacity, reminding him that he had invited his family and friend into my apartment, a space where he hasn't contributed financially, and had no right to insult me simply because I wasn't in a sociable mood. Though he apologized, he still stuck to his offensive comment. I told him that while I didn't mean to come off that way, he had no right to speak to me like that. I understand that he wants me to have a close relationship with his family, which I also desire, but there are limits. His relationship with his parents is completely different from mine. So while I'm trying to be accommodating and supportive, I have boundaries, particularly when it concerns my home. The following day, I informed him that it is now a boundary for us that, as long as he stays in my apartment, neither his nor my parents can visit on weeknights. If I'm working from home, we can discuss exceptions. But the general answer is no. Am I the asshole in this situation? It is completely reasonable for you to set boundaries in your own home, especially considering that your boyfriend hasn't been contributing to rent or utilities. It was disrespectful for him to invite people over without consulting you, and even more so to call you a bitch for expressing your valid concerns. It is important for both partners in a relationship to communicate and respect each other's boundaries, and he should understand and acknowledge that. Am I the antagonist for staying behind while my husband had to leave our vacation early to deal with our daughter? I, a 60-year-old female, often travel to visit my sister and her husband in another province via flying. This time, I decided to invite my 59-year-old husband along with me for the first time. He wasn't enthusiastic about going due to our home situation. Our 24-year-old daughter still lives with us and is heavily dependent on us as she is recovering from severe substance use disorder. Due to the effects, her mental age is more like 13. In the past, leaving her home alone has caused issues. For example, the last time I visited my sister, my husband was away for work. While we were away, our daughter relapsed, brought random people over to our home, which was not allowed, made a mess of the house, and was heavily under the influence of amphetamines. She even called our other children in an unintelligible state. Additionally, she has a habit of leaving taps running for no reason and has proven to be generally irresponsible, even when we are home. Despite these concerns, I convinced my husband to come along because our daughter hadn't used in a few months, and I thought everything would be fine. Plus, I wanted him to help cover the trip's costs. During one of our layovers, he had a phone call with our daughter and felt uneasy afterward. He mentioned her voice sounding off and suggested turning around and going back. However, I reassured him that he was overthinking things and that it would be okay, so he agreed to continue with the trip. The day after we arrived, I received a text from our son suggesting that we book the first flight back. He had checked up on the house and found our daughter clearly under the influence, the house in complete chaos, a stranger and their dog inside, and the basement flooded. It seemed they were both too high to take the dog outside, resulting in multiple messes in the house. Our daughter had also driven our car in this state, despite us leaving her the keys. Understanding that he needed to address the situation at home, my husband decided to go back, while I chose to stay and enjoy the remaining 5 days of the vacation since it had already been paid for. My husband didn't object to this arrangement and went home to handle the extensive damage caused by the flooding. However, my other children and even my husband have expressed that this was unfair and selfish on my part, since the vacation was my idea. They believe I should have listened to my husband's concerns. In response, I tried to explain that I deserve to enjoy my life, even while caring for our daughter. I argued that it's unfair for me to be deprived of vacations because of this situation, and that I couldn't have predicted what happened. However, they still maintain that I should have known better and shouldn't have made my husband handle everything alone. Is it fair to label me as the one at fault here? While it is understandable that you wanted to take a vacation and enjoy your life, it is irresponsible and selfish to prioritize your own enjoyment over the safety and well-being of your daughter. Your husband expressed concerns and instincts about your daughter's well-being, but you dismissed them and convinced him to continue with the vacation. This decision resulted in significant damage to your home and potentially put your daughter at risk. It is important to recognize the impact your actions have on your family and take responsibility for ensuring your daughter's safety. Ignoring your husband's concerns and leaving him to deal with the aftermath suggests a lack of consideration and empathy. It is essential to prioritize the needs of your daughter and address her substance use disorder before prioritizing personal vacations. Am I the antagonist for telling my dad I feel like he made my life way more difficult for reasons that were not worth it? I am a 17-year-old male and I have a strained relationship with my dad. Almost 2 years ago, I moved in with my maternal grandparents, which only made things worse between my dad and me. Recently, he asked me to attend therapy with him to try and mend our relationship. I was hesitant, but I agreed. My grandparents encouraged me to give it a try, but assured me that they would support my decision to end therapy if I needed to, as they understand how difficult my dad can be. To provide some background, my mom passed away when I was a baby. My dad dated a few people when I was young, but I don't remember much about them. When I was about 8, he started dating a woman named Gwen, who eventually became his wife. Gwen was going through a nasty divorce and had a 2-year-old daughter named Katie. My dad rushed into moving them in together to help Gwen with her ex. However, this drastic change had a significant impact on my life. Gwen's ex was a terrible person. He was arrested multiple times and would frequently come to our house, causing chaos by yelling and cursing. Because of this, my dad restricted my social life. I wasn't allowed to have friends over, go to their houses, or hang out with them after school. My dad wanted me to be home so he could keep an eye on things. He even sold our house and downsized so that they could take the ex to court and try to sever his parental rights to Katie. Consequently, as a 10-year-old boy, I found myself sharing a room with a 2-year-old girl whom I hardly knew. We moved around frequently in an attempt to avoid Gwen's ex. When I turned 12, learning disabilities were brought up, and it was discovered that my struggles were due to those disabilities. I was supposed to go for an assessment, but my dad had a meeting with someone who advised that stability in school would be best for my education and overall well-being. However, we continued to move despite this recommendation. I resented all of these changes and disruptions to my life. In my eyes, Gwen and Katie were not worth all the turmoil they caused. When I turned 15, I pleaded with my grandparents to fight for me, and they did. Eventually, due to educational neglect that could be used against my dad, it was decided that I should live with them in order to have stability. This decision further strained my relationship with my dad. During therapy, my dad and I had a few individual sessions and 2 joint sessions. In our last session, my dad expressed his desire to understand why things turned out the way they did. I explained to him how his choices had made my life more difficult and how it wasn't worth it. I pointed out that he never took my well-being into consideration. As long as Gwen and Katie were fine, that was all that mattered to him. He was angry with my statement. After the session, he confronted me, questioning how I could say such things about my stepmom and half-sister. He believed it was a cruel thing to say. Am I the asshole? Based on your description, it seems like you have valid reasons for feeling resentful towards your dad. Your dad made significant changes in your life without considering your feelings, and you ended up experiencing a lot of instability as a result. It's understandable that you would feel frustrated and hurt by this. It is important to have open and honest communication in therapy, and you voiced your genuine feelings during the session. It is reasonable to express that you felt your dad prioritized his relationship with Gwen and Katie over your well-being. It is not cruel to express your truth or share how their actions affected you. It's unfortunate that your dad got angry instead of trying to understand your perspective. The purpose of therapy is to work through these issues, and it's essential for both of you to be open to listening and learning from each other. Ultimately, your grandparents are supportive of you attending therapy and understand the difficulties in your relationship with your dad. It's important to prioritize your own well-being and continue working towards building a healthier relationship with your dad if that's what you desire. Thanks for watching. When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications so you never miss a video. To finish listening to all the stories, check out the playlist in the description.